From jail to justice, the 27 years journey of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela's life story, life journey here, stands as a monumental symbol of courage, resistance and triumph in the face of deep-rooted oppression, right? Here, his 27 years imprisonment is more than just a story of confinement, right? Here, it encapsulates, the profound struggles for freedom and equality in Apartheid era South Africa. His transformation from a political prisoner to the first black president, of a democratic South Africa continues to inspire generation worldwide. This comprehensive, articles aim to explore the many facets of Mandela's journey. His early, activism, his years in prison, the negotiations that led to his release, his presidency, and the lasting legacy he left behind. Each section has been meticulously detailed to provide a historical and obviously holistic understanding of this towering figure in the global fight for human rights, early life and roots of resistance. Nelson Mandela was born on July 1918 in the village of Vejo, in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. He hailed from the Tambo royal family, and from a young age he was exposed to leadership, traditional customs and value of communal decision making, right? So Mandela received a quality education at institutions such as Fort Hare University and later the University of Witwatersrand, where he studied law, right? So during these formative years, Mandela became acutely aware of the racial discriminations entrenched in South Africa, society, right? In South Africa society. So here, this awareness grew during his to move to Johannesburg, where he experienced firsthand the systematic injustices faced by black South Africans. So in 1944, Mandela joined the African National Congress, that we called ANC, right? So a political organization committed to the rights and freedom of black South Africans, alongside Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu. He co-founded the ANC, African National Council, right? So here Congress, African National Congress, right? So here youth leagues aimed at energizing the organizations with militant activisms, through mass mobilizations, protests, and advocacy. Nelson Mandela began to play, an increasingly visible role in anti-apartheid resistance. Right, so the rise of apartheid and radicalizations of resistance. The National Party victory in 1948, institutionalized apartheid, legalized system of racial segregation that entrenched white supremacy across all aspects of life: education, housing, employment, healthcare, and civil rights. So here the regime enforced discriminatory laws like the Group Areas Act and the past laws, right, which severely restricted the movement and rights of non-white citizens. So Mandela initially advocated for non-violent resistance inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's principle. However, the Sharpeville massacre of 1960s, where police opened fire on peaceful protesters, killing 69 and wounding hundreds, marked a turning point. The government responded with mass arrest and a ban of liberations movement, including the ANC. In response, Mandela helped establish, Umkhonto we Sizwe, right? So, spear of the nation, the armed wing of the ANC. Its aim was to sabotage, government installations and destabilize, right, the regime without targeting civilians. Mandela traveled across Africa and even to London to garner international support for the armed struggle. So in 1962, Mandela was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison for inciting strikes and leaving the country illegally, right? In 1963, further charges were brought against him and his colleagues during the Rivonia trial, right, where they were accused of sabotage and attempting to overthrow the straight, right? So Mandela's famous, courtroom speech remains one of the most powerful declaration of justice, that I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of democratic and free society in which all persons, live together in harmony and with equal opportunities, right? So it is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, right? But if needs to be, it is an ideal for which I am, prepared to die, right? So in 1964 he was sentenced to live imprisonment, sentenced to life imprisonment, right? In 1964 he was sentenced to life imprisonment, right? So here the 27-year imprisonment, Robben Island and beyond. So here Mandela began his incarceration. Mandela began his incarceration at Robben Island, a remote and windswept island of Cape Town, right? So the prison was here, notorious for its brutal condition, hard labor in limestone, quarries, meager food rations, right? So a cramped cells entitled to no contact with outside worlds, right? So political imprisonment here, the political prisoners like Mandela were classified as the lowest category and were subjected to harsh treatment, right? So despite the condition, Mandela showed remarkable resilience. He became a source of strength and wisdom for his fellow prisoners, right? Promoting education, debate and mutual respect. Robben Island became the informal university where inmates taught each other languages, politics, economics and history. Mandela studied Afrikaans to understand his oppressors and engaged with prison authorities diplomatically to win incremental rights. So in 1982, Mandela was transferred to Palmore prison, in Cape Town, and later to Victory, Worcester prison in 1988. Conditions improved slightly, and Mandela was allowed occasion meeting with government officials. By this time he was already a global icon, right? So here symbolizing the anti-apartheid struggle, the international support for Mandela grew steadily. So here cultural boycotts, economic sanctions and diplomatic pressures mounted, right? So Free Mandela became a rallying cry worldwide. Countries, institutions and citizens across continents recognized the injustice of apartheid and demanded challenge. So global pressure and shifting politics in South Africa. By 1980s, apartheid South Africa faced immense internal and external pressure. Economically, sanctions and divestment, right, campaigns here stagned the nation, right? So politically, mass uprising, particularly in black townships like Soweto, showcased widespread civil unrest. So globally, the anti-apartheid movement had gained unstoppable moment. So in 1985, then President PW both offered Mandela conditions released if he renounced violence. Mandela refused, asserting that it was the government, not the oppressed, that should renounce violence, right? So here this moral stance further elevated his standing as a principled leader. So in 1989, FWD Clark, right, so here succeeded both and recognized the instability of apartheid. So in a historic moment, he lifted the ban of liberation movements, released several political prisoners and initiated reforms. So on February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Worcester prison, hand in hand with his then wife Winnie Mandela. The movement was broadcast worldwide. So it was not only the liberation of a man, but symbolic release of an entire nation, from decades of racial tyranny. So negotiating a new South Africa here. Post-release, Mandela assumed leadership of ANC and spearheaded negotiation with the National Party government. The path of democratic was complex and totally fraught with obstacles. South Africa witnessed continued, violence, political assassinations, and extremist resistance. So here, despite provocations, Mandela remained steadfast in his commitment to peace and dialogue. The Convention for Democratic South Africa, that we could CODESA, brought together multiple political groups, to forge a new constitution. So Mandela's strategic patience, moral authority, and negotiation skill were instrumental in this talk. So in 1993, Mandela and de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts and dismantle apartheid peacefully. So this collaboration, and their collaboration thought not without friction, underscored the importance of dialogue in resolving even the most deeply, entrenched conflicts. So democratic elections and Mandela's presidency in 1994 April, in April 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections. Over 20 million people cast their votes. So the ANC secured a majority, and on May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela was sworn in South Africa's first black president. Right. So in 1994, 10th May, Nelson Mandela was sworn in as South Africa's first black president. His inauguration was attended by world leaders and watched by millions. So Nelson Mandela's presidency was a symbol of hope. His inaugural speech, called for unity, forgiveness, and commitment to building a non-racial, inclusive society. So we entered into a covenant that we shall build the society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without any fear in their hearts. So here Mandela's government, prioritized national unity and reconciliation. One of the most enduring, initiatives was the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that we call TRC, chaired by, Archbishop, Desmond Tutu. So the TRC, investigated, human rights abuse committed during the apartheid era, allowing victims to share their stories and perpetrators, to seek amnesty through full, disclosure. Right. So here Mandela here also, championed economic reforms aimed, at addressing the vast disparities created the apartheid. His policies, included land reforms, employment equity, and black economic empowerment. Though progress was slow and challenges immense, the foundation for inclusive governance, was laid. So Mandela's presidency also marked South Africa's, reintegration, into the international community. Right. So here, the country rejoined the Commonwealth, hosted the Rugby World Cup in 1995, and began forging strong diplomatic and economic ties. World Cup. Right. So this is all about here. The final the lesson is what here. The power of forgiveness. Mandela forgave, those who jailed him, fostering national healing. The importance of dialogue, even with, adversaries. Mandela believed in negotiation over violence. Leadership through example here. He lived the values he preached, showing humility, integrity, and resilience. Justice over vengeance. He sought truth and reconciliation instead of retribution. So the conclusion of the point is what here, that Nelson Mandela's journey from jail to justice to a chronicle of resilience, moral convictions, and visionary leadership. His 27 years of incarceration didn't dismiss his commitment to freedom. Instead, it transformed him into a global symbol of resistance, peace, and unity. So upon his release, Mandela chose reconciliations over revenge, unity over divisions, and democracy over dictatorship. His presidency laid the groundwork for new South Africa, one built on principles of justice, equality, and shared humanity. So today, Mandela's life serves as a beacon for, oppressed people and struggling nations everywhere. His example demonstrates that even the darkest prisons, cell can produce the brightest light of hope. So in remembering Mandela, we are reminded that true leadership is not measured by power or position, but by the ability to transform suffering into strength and vision into reality. So the document has now been, this is the point here, all about the journey of Nelson Mandela from jail to justice. So yeah.